Hey, will you do this with me? Let's pray together real quick as we get started. Back your heads, please. Father, I just pray right now that in this time together that you will move and that you will speak into the lives of the people here today. And that it'll be your words and not my own. That we will just be able to learn from your word and that it will be transformational. Father, that's all our hope is. It's your name we pray. Amen. Well, hey, as we dive into this, I want to posture ourselves in prayer initially, honestly, because I think that the subject matter today is very pertinent. It's very applicable, and regardless of where you're at, it's going to hit you in one way or the other. We're in the middle of this series. Well, I should say we're at the end of this series. We're doing a 3-week series called Steal My Thunder. And so if you're a new person, welcome. My name's Seth Conerly. I'm the campus and teaching pastor. We're really excited to have you with us. And we've been doing for these last 2 weeks this discussion of stealing one's thunder. And the working definition we've been using for what that means is this. It's stealing one's thunder is any time we allow something, or even someone in some cases, to take away one of those profoundly empowering God-given things that compels us and drives us in life. So last week, we really kind of looked at what was more or less the traditional understanding of that phrase, which was this stolen identity, comparison, all these things. Because to steal one's thunder is to overshadow someone, to steal the limelight, take away their credit and all that. And so that was one of those profoundly empowering things was, comparison. If we're not careful, we will tie our identity up in other people and not in what God would have us. And so we talked about that in stolen identity. In the first week, we talked about stolen hope and how hope is such an empowering reality, but there are many instances in life where we feel our hope has been taken from us. And this week, being the final week, we're talking all about purpose specifically. And purpose, when I say that out loud, can I be real with you, is not something that you initially hear and go, oh, it's so weighty. Like it's overwhelming, that word purpose. Like, I don't know, just intrinsically does it feel that way? But applicably and living it out in our lives, if we think about it, it really is. Because there are a number of subject matter that I talk about up here, or Paul talks about, or anybody that comes across this stage that may or may not even hit you, if I'm being real. Like last week, for example, we talked so much about comparison. There is a strong chance that a certain number of you in here, that's just not something you deal with. You go, man, I just kind of do my own thing. It's just not something I struggle with, and that's not where I'm at. Now, a lot of us do, but that might not be something you struggle with. But every once in a while, we hit one of these things that it does not matter who you are, it's going to hit you in one way or another. And that brings a new level of significance and potentially even weightiness to the conversation. And purpose is one of the single most significant of these things. It's just universal. And it's universal in a way that some of us, if we're not careful, don't even realize. Because for some of you, very actively, purpose is why you wake up in the morning. Namely, you have something in mind that you're working towards. Maybe that's been a degree path. Maybe that's been a job that you're trying to attain. Maybe it is a relationship you want to find yourself. But whatever the thing is that you're finding purpose from every day, you are waking up with that thing being the thing that fuels your flame, as it would be. Sometimes maybe it's even subconscious that's what's happening and you don't even realize it. Or you just find yourself in a floaty emptiness because whether you want to admit it or not, you feel like your life is devoid of purpose. Right? That's the single greatest question that we have as an individual when we are in existence, quite frankly, is why do I exist? What is my purpose? Why am I here? And when you feel that you don't have one, it is a really, really overwhelming, really just debilitating, fear-inducing, hope-removing context to be in. But if you find purpose, it's great. But the problem is this: if you're not careful, the thing that you find purpose in is not maintainable, is not sustainable. And once you have it, what then? What then? I'll give you some examples. For me, purpose is one that I've experienced a number of instances in my life where purpose, I realized after the fact, was found in something I probably shouldn't have. Not necessarily bad things, just things that weren't going to last or maintain. Examples being, I've told you in the past, I did running and all sorts of kind of things that tied to that from high school into college. And in high school, as I headed to the end, I wanted to break the state record, and I found great purpose. And I woke up every morning and I ran. Why? With the intentionality of doing that. Now, I'll be honest with you, I was a follower of Jesus at the time. I wanted my running to be a form of worship for sure. But if I'm being honest, I was finding great purpose from this end goal. And so the question I didn't ask myself at the time was this: what if A, I get it, what then? Or B, if I don't, what then? When you're constantly waking up, when this is the focal point, when it is the thing, whether you actively or don't realize that you're finding great purpose and you are in trouble when the thing is even given to you or taken away. It doesn't matter which one it is. And so I ultimately did not beat the state record. And so it became a very, well, what is my purpose? What am I was working for this for so long. What hope do I have in you, God? And it immediately connects to the other things we've even already talked about. My hope was taken from me, and I didn't feel like I had any purpose. I was talking to a friend literally 2 days ago as we were at breakfast, and it was a similar conversation that I quite frankly have had with a few of you in our church. And it's where a lot of us find ourselves. He said, look, here's the deal. He was telling me his story and kind of where God has led him and how he ended up where he is now. And he said, look, I had a lot of things, that kind of purposes that I was working towards, that I was finding great purpose in. And that was to be, the boss by 30, driving this kind of car, making this kind of money, having the girl on my arm. Like, this is what I was looking for. And he said, I got all of it. He said, I turned 30 and I had it all. He said, honestly, I didn't have it right at 30, but about halfway through the year, I got the final thing that was on my list. And then I went, what now? I've got everything and I've been purposefully working towards it. But that's gone now. The intentionality, the thing that I have been pushing for has now been given to me. But now I feel purposeless. And that's such a weird thing to think about, because you got the thing you wanted. It wasn't that it was taken away. It wasn't that you had this goal to do this by 30 and you didn't get any of it. He got it all. And I think that's the same thing that happens, quite frankly, with celebrities and people. As we look at Hollywood and all these things, we see people who go, man, from a young age, I wanted to be famous. I want to be a star. I wanted to do all these things. I want to, get an Oscar. I want to do everything that you could think of. And all of a sudden they find it and then they lose their minds. Why? Because that was the purpose. That was all they were working for. And once they got it, they were still left with themselves. And a lot of things they hadn't dealt with, and their purpose was found in something that wasn't going to work. A lot of times I process my messages after I give them, and I was talking to Tim Weirach, our campus pastor over at Vandalia, after the message last night, and he said, man, I'm telling you, there are instances that you even see this in sports. Tim is a huge sports buff. I am a poser to a certain degree when it comes to sports stuff. I'll be honest with you. I try to get into it. Now, I will say I've gotten more into the Cards and the Blues than I've gotten anything in my life, mostly because Mississippi doesn't really have sports teams that are of any kind. Outside of college football. But anyway, so I'm just not the guy that's glued to ESPN all the day. That's not to say there's anything wrong with that. Some of you guys, that's your bread and butter, and that's awesome. I feel like you're talking Chinese to me when we have a conversation. You're like, yeah, they drafted that. I'm like, yeah, sports ball. I'm telling you. And they're like, you're okay. Get out of here. Yeah. And so I was talking to Tim, who is very much just all in when it comes to these deals. And he was saying, Seth, the situation is that in the NFL and things like that, what will happen is a player will all of a sudden be amazing all throughout college in their career. And they'll get into the NFL and all of a sudden they will be horrible. They won't be worth anything. They don't progress. They don't make any sort of milestones in their career. And he said the issue that psychologists have studied was that the only goal, the only purpose that they were working towards was just to get in the NFL. And once they got there, they didn't have anything beyond that. They didn't want to be an MVP in any game. They didn't want to go to the Super Bowl. They didn't want to be in the Hall of Fame. Like, those weren't their goals anymore. They had attained it, and then they just coasted, and then they just kind of petered out. And many of them find themselves in some pretty messed up debacles as they begin to focus on other things that are not helping with their career. And all of a sudden, everything fades away. What does that look like for you? What are some things in your life that if you're not careful, your thunder will be stolen in reference to? What about if your purpose, and I've kind of loosely alluded to this earlier already, but if your purpose every morning was to wake up and like find and get in a relationship, like you've been single your whole life, you may or may not have dated on and off with somebody, but at the end of the day, like when you wake up, you might not even want to admit it to yourself, but a lot of what you're finding your purpose in is this long-term goal of being in a relationship, finding someone. But my question to you is, when you get it, if you get it, what then? If that's what your purpose is, then I'm going to give you a pretty big warning. 6 months down the road, when all the butterflies, and can I be real with you? Like just a few months into your relationship, you don't know what a relationship is yet. It doesn't matter what phase of life you're in. I had never been in a relationship that exceeded roughly 3 months until I dated and ultimately married my wife. And so every one of those relationships, it was just rainbows and butterflies until it came crashing down real abruptly for random reasons. And it wasn't until I had to truly endeavor alongside somebody and deal with my junk and deal with their junk that I really found what it was to endeavor alongside somebody. And I had to realize that just as much as for her as for me, our purpose had to be found in something else. Our validity had to be found in something else than each other. Because if it was, we were going to let each other down pretty regularly. And so for you, if that's your aspiration is this relational thing, the bad news for you is what then? What when you get it? Here's one, and I share this pretty regularly, but, when we as a family are moving into that season where we're about to have a kid. And for a lot of you, that might be a goal for you. Maybe it's to get the job, get the car, get the wife, get the kids, the 2.5 kids, right? And you've got the little perfect American dream. And you're sitting there in this context, and so many people I watch it happen. They've worked towards this, they got it all, and those are all very good things. But it has been the purpose for which they woke up for, and what about once you get it? Because of the season we're in, the subject matter that I get to talk to, obviously when you're where we're at, everybody comes to you and wants to talk about the fact that you're having kids. But the reality is other people are walking through heavy seasons because they're trying to have kids and they can't. And that's a very, very debilitating, very scary, very helpless feeling as you are wanting this. And it's a very good desire as you're wanting to create this family. But a heavy question I have for you is, are you finding your purpose in the end goal of being a parent? Because once you are one, what then? If that's what your purpose was in, what then? Maybe it's a degree. Maybe you've been working. Some of you have been educating for longer than it feels like you've been alive. You know what I'm talking about? You're like, I've been in school. I don't even know if I've lived this long. I've just been in school. It feels like it's been, years. Have I been in school for 100 years? I don't think, but it feels like it. And you're just cruising through it. And there's actually studies that show that when people complete their doctorate degree, that they will sink into depression because they have this end goal in mind that they've been working for their entire life. And when they get it, they kind of go, well, what now? And a lot of them just go back and get another doctorate degree because they don't know anything else to do. And you see this lack of purpose feeding in everything. And the reason is that if we're not careful, and very consistently, myself being the chief offender, you will find your purpose in something that will not actually be purposeful. And certainly isn't maintainable. Maybe you want to be a doctor. Maybe you want to be a lawyer. I had 2 guys that were twin brothers throughout the entirety of school wanted to be firemen. Like, that kid dream whenever you're a kid and you're like, I want to be a police car. I want to be a police car. Did I just say that? Yeah. Some of your kids, that's you. They're like, I want to be a transformer. And you're like, okay. I want to be a dinosaur. I don't know. But maybe they want to be a policeman. These guys wanted to be firemen. Paramedics. Like ever since we were kids, that's all they talked about. And whenever we graduated, guess what? That's what they became. But the question is, what then? What about when you get that thing that you've been pushing for and after? This is a good one to have, but if you find your purpose in, weirdly enough, you will find yourself let down. And that is, what if your purpose is to make a difference? This is a weird one. What if for you have something on? Maybe it's a nonprofit that you want to plant. Maybe it is a orphanage in a faraway land that you want to see built. Maybe just these good things. that you're working towards. But if in and of itself, you are not careful and you begin to find your identity in that, your purpose from that, when you actually do it, if you do it, what then? Because if your purpose was found in that individual thing, although it's a good thing, you will still feel very lost and adrift when the day comes that you are finally given the thing you've been working for. Now, here's the more heavy side of that. So all I've been talking about is giving you example after example of you are given this, you get this, what then? The follow-up that's pretty obvious is this. What about if you don't get it? What if you aren't the one who's going to attain that thing? What if you don't get the kids? What if you don't find a spouse? What if you don't get the job you always wanted? What if you actually don't even get the degree you want? What if you flunk out? What then? Because if you're not careful, your purpose will have been found in something instead of someone eternal that is sustaining, is fulfilling. And you will find yourself in a very bad place. Thunder itself is a very interesting concept. Weirdly enough, I haven't talked about just thunder as we've done this series, but thunder is both a beautiful and terrifying thing. So is purpose. I remember years and years ago, and one thing that you guys have here, that we have here, that I just, as I moved here, I did not foresee, okay? So in Mississippi and then even in North Carolina, we live in North Carolina, you got mountains, so you don't see as much. Mississippi, you've got pine trees that touch the sky as far as you can see, and you don't see anything. Here, as we all know, it is all flat, save corn. But the beauty of it is when a storm comes rolling in, how beautiful is that? You can see it coming from afar. Over the cornfields in the distance, you can see heat lightning just flashing in the night sky. You can hear the dull and just building bass and rumble of the storm as it rolls in over the fields. And you can hear it reverberate across the clouds as it comes towards your home. I remember just literally a couple of nights ago when that hit, it was like beautiful white noise that literally lulled me to sleep as I was getting ready to go to bed, and this low, distant rumble just caressed me and slowly lulled me into sleep. That is not always the case with thunder, though. There's been a couple other instances we've had even in recent history. And then additionally, I think back of ones I've experienced back in Mississippi right before Hurricane Katrina hit. There was the wave of storms that kind of hit the ground. And I lived very close to the coast. And so our whole area was absolutely destroyed by Katrina. And so with that, as I was looking, towards that happening, watching the weather, I was running. And so I went out for a run in a cow field. Yes, I just further double down on the redneckness that I have. I hear myself say it, and I know you hear it, and you're like, did you see it? And I'm like, I did. All right, let's just move on. I was in the middle of a cow field running, and all of a sudden this storm came in, and it just came in so fast. And all of a sudden, lightning was just popping all around me. I could see it across the field. And it's that horrifying moment when lightning strikes at the exact moment thunder hits. You know what I'm talking about? When that signals that it's right on top of you. And it just is deafening, the sheer just reverberate. I mean, it is just, your whole body lurches in response to it. And I remember just in sheer fear and terror as I watched this go around, I just sprinted as fast as I could into my car to get out of there. I was horrified that I was just that was it. That was about to be the end of it. And purpose is something that can be both terrifying if it sneaks up on you and you don't have a plan, you didn't think about it, you didn't have any intentionality behind it, or it can be something very beautiful if you understand it for what it is supposed to be and you walk in it in a healthy way. It can be beautiful and amazing. And so the question for yourself is, what does that look like for you? And specifically, what does it look like in the context of not receiving that which you've been working towards or wanting or seeing, whatever? So our takeaway statement today is this. So if you're taking notes, this is one to write down. It's this. It's godly purpose is realized when we stop viewing our circumstances as affliction, but as opportunity. Godly purpose is realized when we stop viewing our circumstances as affliction, but as opportunity. We're going to be looking at the life of a guy named Joseph. The last 2 weeks we've been in the New Testament talking about Peter, who's a fun guy, and I always love talking about Peter. But Joseph is a very different personality and a very different lifestyle, even in the way he follows God. And a lot of what we used with Peter was like, I don't know if you caught it, it was like, don't do this. It was more or less the context of Peter. This is what Peter did. Don't be Peter. For us, we're going to be looking at Joseph this week, and really, he's an amazing example of this specific thing we're talking about and purpose. And we're going to be looking at the overarching narrative of his life and really hitting about 8 chapters of information. So you better buckle up because we about to cruise, son. Genesis 37 is where we're at. We're going to be starting talking about Jacob, his father, also known as Israel. And so this is where we begin. Genesis 37, verse 1. If you got a Bible, read along. Notes are in the Bible app. If you don't have a Bible, we got them in the back. Take it. It's yours. Jacob lived in the land where his father had stayed, the land of Canaan. This is the account of Jacob's family line. Joseph, a young man of 17, make a mental note of that, was tending the flocks with his brothers, the sons of Bilhah and the sons of Zilpah, his father's wives, and he brought their father a bad report about them. Depending on your translation, it kind of, the verbiage there is different, but what it boils down to is he was ratting on his brothers. They were doing something they shouldn't, and it literally is, as he went home, it's like, Dad, the brothers, they did this. Like, that's what's happening in this context. Maybe you have a household that is a very regular occurrence. So it says this, verse 3. Now Israel, or Jacob, loved Joseph more than any of his other sons. Not a good follow-up to the previous. Dad, they're being awful. I love you more than all of them, son. This is already a really bad family dynamic if you're not catching wind of this. Which is also an ironic tie to what we talked about last week. Why? Because comparison and favoritism is already coming into effect in this household, which, as we know from last week, does not have good results. So it says he loved his more than his other sons because he had been born to him in his old age. And he made an ornate robe for him. Jacket, coat, or robe. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. So this is the story of Joseph. Now, the most popularized version of this story is Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. Like, that's if you're a Broadway musical person, that was adapted from this actual biblical narrative. Not really a lot. I mean, it's not really the same, just so we're clear. Like, you're like, ooh, now I'm up to speed. You're really not. Yeah, different deal. But he gets this coat, and we don't really have a lot of context to what it looks like. The bottom line is, it is a physical representation of his father's favor on him. And above all his other siblings. So it's not enough that his dad's like, I love you more. It's like, let me make sure everyone else realizes it. Yeah, it's like, I'm going to physically give you something that puts you in front of the pack. So Joseph has already set himself up for some pretty big losses. He's favored by his father, which he can't help. He can't control that. Nothing in the narrative makes us realize that he is like causing this outside of, tattletelling on his brothers, but that doesn't necessarily elicit favoritism. But the tattletelling side of things, the ratting on him side of things, that's not something that's going to get you a lot of friends. And then he gets this physical representation. Well, I thought it'd be fun, at least for us visually. I'm a visual learner. I don't know about you. As I am studying this, I am just all over the place as I'm studying through these things and preparing. So I thought it would be fun. It says elaborate jacket, and I looked up as many kind of reference points as I could to what the jacket looked like. Not a lot of ones. So I made up my own. I found some really elaborate jackets. So let's see a few of those. Let's see what we got. Maybe it looked like that. I don't know. Maybe it was a jacket of teddy bears. Considering Teddy Roosevelt coined the teddy bear, I doubt that. Next one, let's see what we've got. There we go. Yeah. Ooh, okay. Me inside of a hand jacket. That's cool. Yeah, there we go. Oh, there it is. All right. Middle note, Seth, don't choose chroma key green as the option in your images. Yeah. Next one, let's see what we've got. Okay, this one should be noted. Some of you are looking at it and you say, that looks like the Handmaid's Tale in Antarctica, but that is not what it is. This is Montclair, or however you pronounce it. This past December released these bad boys, like full-body dress-down jackets, and they sold out. This was a big deal this past December, and some of you are like, no, it's not. Yeah, it is. And some of you are like, well, then I think I want on board. So if you come to church in the winter with that bad boy on, I want you to know something. I'm not going to say anything, but I will judge you, just so we're clear. Like internally, like that's going to happen. Yeah, I'm going to have to work on my heart. Next one. All right, so this one, this is for Burning Man, for all of you Burning Man fans. They can find this. I made sure I screenshot the actual deal. Yeah, you can get that back. For $490, you can buy that jacket. The more scary part is in the upper right. There are 39 5-star reviews. 39 people were very satisfied with that purchase. Well, they were like, I spent $490 and it was well worth it on this goofy furry jacket. And if you're asking yourself, I wonder if Seth read the reviews, you are correct. Of course, I read them all. One of them that was the best was this girl I should have brought the picture of that. She took LED lights and ran it through the whole thing. It was like, it even is LED friendly. This is great. I know that that's what I'm looking for in a jacket. But anyways, these are some fun ones. So I just wanted to look at those because that was where my crazy brain went. So Joseph has this very elaborate jacket that is just this physical representation of his father's favoritism. Beyond that, Joseph makes some other poor decisions as we keep reading in the chapter. Joseph begins to have these dreams, and in these dreams, they boil down to that his brothers are going to kind of bow to him in subjugation, and his father is going to do the same. And Joseph, being the super smart guy that we've already seen that he is, did he go, I probably shouldn't share that. They already are super mad at me, and they probably wouldn't like that. No, he decides that it'd be a great idea to tell them all about it. So he goes to his brothers and his dad, and he goes, I had a dream, and you're all going to bow down to me like I'm like a ruler or something, and you're like at my feet. Ain't that crazy? And they're like, we're going to kill you. Like that's kind of where they land with that. They're like, you are the worst. Like we can't deal with you anymore. You're just done. And so what happens is that Joseph is one day just walking to his brothers, and they're off in the distance, and they literally do that. They go, hey, do y'all want to kill Joseph? They're like, were you thinking, are we just on the same wavelength right now? Yes, let's kill him. And so they all get together in this decision. One of them speaks up, is like, can we just dial it back a couple of notches and maybe like not kill him? Maybe we could like throw him in a pit or something. And they're like, fine. And so they go and they throw him in this pit. And while that brother walks away, these slavers come up and they go, ooh, let's sell them into slavery. And they're like, that's a top-notch idea. High five for you right now. And so they sell them into slavery. The other brother comes back and they're like, you sold them into slavery? And he's like, yeah, we did. And they're like, okay, well, let's figure out what we're going to tell Dad. And they walk back home. They bloody up this coat, the coat. And they're like, he got eaten by an animal. Ha! And then that's how they kind of explain it away. Joseph gets hauled off to Egypt, where he goes into the house of a guy named Potiphar. And Potiphar is the captain of the guards for Pharaoh, so a very high-ranking official. And so Joseph, who had everything going for him, was the favorite in his household. All these things, now finds himself not only kind of knocked off his pedestal, but he's literally in slavery. And so that's what brings us to our first point, and it's this. Stupid decisions or unfair circumstances do not prevent godly purpose. A little foreshadowing for you in the reference to where this story is about to go. The dumb decisions, the foolish decisions, the poor decisions of your life, or the unfair circumstances that were outside of your control, whether you want to admit it or not, you have got to get past the point where you are thinking these things disqualify you from having godly purpose and intentionality in your life. Some of you walked in here today and that's where you're sitting, and you've been sitting there for a long time where you go, I can't have godly purpose, Seth, because you don't know where I've been. I've done this, or maybe you didn't do anything and it was done to you. And you're the victim of it. Joseph finds himself on both of those. He made some very poor decisions in the way he was interacting with his siblings. It's not justifying what they did, but it at least makes us go, we understand how they, in an unhealthy way, got to the conclusion they did. He was just being awful. Whether he, and that's one part of this story we don't really think about. We just always paint Joseph in such a perfect light that we go, actually, at the beginning of the story, he just probably wasn't doing some wise things right there. Like, that wasn't advisable. Like, in your household, none of you would encourage your kids to make the decisions Joseph was making in those moments necessarily. But additionally, it was outside of his control. He had no power over the fact that his father was showing favoritism to him. Now, he could have not worn the coat and all that, and we could go into all those semantics. But at the end of the day, he didn't have control over that. And you were in the same context. Maybe what is done for you, the abuse that you have endured at some point in time in your life, it's very unfair. It was not okay. It was very wrong. But you have now allowed that thing to be the thing that makes you feel devoid of purpose and intentionality from God. You go, well, God could not do anything with me because of what I now am, because of what was done to me. Maybe for you, you were sitting in that way. Maybe it was done to people you care about. Maybe it was done to you in the context that it was just something taken from you that you really desired and were working for. One of those purposeful things we talked about earlier. What is the thing that is making you feel that your purpose is gone? And Joseph in this moment could have been there. Joseph could have said, I'm in slavery now, and no purpose or anything exists for me. I'm done. Thankfully, he did not. So what happens is Joseph prospers in Potiphar's house. He is glorifying the Lord. One thing you're going to see is a just continuous theme is just Joseph pointing credit to God, giving praise to God, focusing on God, which is the kind of bottom reality we're trying to get to in all this. And through that, God blesses him, and he kind of climbs the ranks in Potiphar's house. And he all of a sudden is kind of at the head of the household. Literally, if Potiphar goes off to war, he's defending the Pharaoh or whatever, Joseph is left in charge. What occurs is that it tells us that Joseph was an extremely attractive young man. And Potiphar's wife had the hots for Joseph, is what it boils down to. Potiphar's wife looks at him and goes, hey, I want you to take me to bed. I want to kind of, go down this not so healthy, not God glorifying path with you behind my husband's back. Like, let's make this happen. And she comes after him time and time again. He goes, no. And not only does he convey that it's because it would be dishonoring to Potiphar, but he points that it's even far more significant that it would not glorify God. Constant theme. God focus, God focus, God focus. And so what happens is that she makes a pass at him anyways. So she comes to him, she goes, no, let's make this happen. And honestly, I think that in the New Testament, when you study the passages of Scripture that talk about to literally flee sexual immorality, you see that consistently throughout the New Testament when that is discussed, I think they had this narrative of Joseph from the Old Testament in mind. Because in this moment, Joseph is a attractive guy, and a lady's coming after him, and he literally flees. Like, he's standing there, she grabs his cloak, and he jets. Like it says, he just sprinted. He fled. Like he was just gone. Just puff of smoke, and Joseph's out of here. But what happens is she was grabbing his cloak in such a way that it was literally ripped off of him as he runs out. And so what we see in the narrative is that he is literally running in his underwear. He's streaking out of the house to get away and flee from the sexual immorality is what it boils down to. And so in so doing, what happens is that his wife keeps the cloak, and when Potiphar comes home, she makes up a pretty severe kind of career-ending lie for Joseph. And she goes, hey, Joseph tried to bed me. He tried to seduce me. And, what are you going to do about that? This guy, he's the head of your household, huh? Look, and here's the evidence. And so that's where we pick up right here in Genesis 39:19. And it says this: when his master heard the story his wife told him, saying, this is how your slave treated me, he burned with anger. Joseph's master took him and put him in prison, the place where the king's prisoners were confined. But while Joseph was there in prison, the Lord was with him. He showed him kindness and granted him favor in the eyes of the prison warden. So the warden put Joseph in charge of all those held in the prison, and he was made responsible for all that was done there. The warden paid no attention to anything under Joseph's care because the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success in whatever he did. So point 2 is this: finding purpose is not defined by your setting, but by your heart attitude. Finding purpose is not found by your setting, or even your destination and goal would be another way of phrasing that, but by your heart's attitude. See, because of your context, because of the hand you've been dealt, whatever you're sitting in right now, you might feel very purposeless. But the issue is if you're not careful, you will begin to find purpose in something that cannot give you purpose. I was talking to somebody last night after the service, and they said, Seth, as I have, I'm military, I've been all over the world, I've done all these things, and people constantly in these kind of situations talk, God's got a purpose for your life. And he said, but they never say what the purpose is. They're just like, he's got a purpose. Figure it out. You got it. And that's where it lands. And the problem is that when you do that, you're posturing yourself to look at something to give you purpose instead of someone. And that someone is Jesus Christ. That something is a daily walk with him. That is a focal point. That is a life focus. Day in and day out is what you are running everything in your life through. If you have some tangible thing in mind later down the road, that is fine. Dreams are great. But if that is what your identity is wrapped up in, and if that is what your purpose is found in, you will be let down. And if your setting is feeding into that, your life right now, if you just feel purposeless because of the season of life you're in, that you've already missed out on what purpose even is. Purpose is not the setting you're in, the cards you've been dealt, the family you've been given, the car you drive, the job you wish you, blah, 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 blah. Purpose is your heart attitude. It is where you are finding your validity from, and your purpose is being founded in. Your identity is wrapped up in. And thankfully, Joseph is recognizing that God is the thing that should be in. Even in the midst of, and I hate to break to you, your situation is not worse than his. He's been sold into slavery, and if that wasn't bad, he's like, hey, this couldn't get worse. Nope, prison. Like the only thing after this is execution. Like that's all we've got left for the guy. And in the midst of all this, he is pointing to God and finding his validity therein. So let's keep cruising forward. So what happens, if you can't tell, I am trying to give you all these mainstay points. If you want to go back, we could do a study on Joseph for like half a year. There's just so much rich stuff here. But Joseph is in prison. What happens is the baker and the cupbearer for Pharaoh get put in prison. Pharaoh gets mad at him. He sends them to prison. They both have these weird dreams. And Joseph kind of is interacting with them. And he talks to them about it. And they tell him the dreams. And he goes, well, I think God's got a word for you. And this is what it is. He tells the cupbearer, he says, look, in 3 days' time, you are going to be reinstated. And you're going to be at the kind of right hand of the king again. You're going to be great. He's like, awesome. He goes, but hey, when you get there, don't forget me. Don't forget what I did for you right here. And that God did for you. And he's like, okay. And he leaves. And then he goes to the baker and he goes, hey, in 3 days, your head's going to be a pike. And he's like, what? He's like, yeah, no, it's not going to go so well for you. Yeah, not good to be you right now. Sure enough, happens. He's killed. The cupbearer is reinstated. But what it tells us is that the cupbearer completely forgot about Joseph. Like he gets back. He's like, free. I don't have to worry about this. 2 years pass. And the king all of a sudden has some really bad dreams. Nobody can help him out. Nobody can interpret them, give him any sort of kind of context on it. And the cupbearer goes, hey, I remember that guy in prison. He goes to the king and he goes, hey, you remember when you were super mad at me and how we had to get a new cook? You remember that? You might want to talk to a guy named Joseph. He's in prison. And let's see where that takes us. So Genesis 41, verse 14. So Pharaoh sent for Joseph, and he was quickly brought from the dungeon. When he had shaved and changed his clothes, I love the details in Scripture. Do you understand that? He's been in prison for over 2 years now. He's like full Tom Hanks Castaway right now. Like beard is like full down. He is not looking great. The guy that Potiphar's wife was like, pining after is not the man that walked out of prison, okay? He walked out and he was like, Wilson! And then they shaved his beard. And so they're getting ready to go before the king. He came before Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I had a dream and no one can interpret it. But I've heard it said of you that when you hear a dream, you can interpret it. I love this. He's been in prison for forever. The guy's like, this is the one way for your freedom. And this is Joseph's response. I cannot do it. Just to me, I can't do it. And you're like, oh, okay, you're dumb. Joseph replied to Pharaoh. Thankfully, he saved himself. And pointed yet again to where his purpose came from. His response was this, but God will give Pharaoh the answer he desires. So he did not take the credit for himself. He did not put it upon himself. And so what happens is Joseph and Pharaoh interact over this. And Joseph says, okay, this is what's going on in your dream. We're going to have 7 years of prosperity. Crops are going to be growing like crazy. Everything's going to be amazing. We're going to be cruising. Like it's excess, my friend. But then there's going to be 7 years of famine. And if we don't gear up for it, it won't matter how great the first 7 years are. We're all going to be done for. And so I got a plan, though, if you want to hear it. And that plan is this, that we need to take these next 7 years, store up in our storehouses in preparation for the 7 years of drought. And this is where we pick up, because Pharaoh really likes the plan. Genesis 41, so we're skipping forward in that same chapter. So Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the whole land of Egypt. He just went from prison to second in command. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his finger and put it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in robes of fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. He had him ride in a chariot as his second in command, and people shouted before him, make way! Thus he put him in charge of the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, which in that land pretty much meant I'm God, just so we're clear. Like that was what, in that pagan society, Pharaoh was literally deity to those people. Not to Joseph, obviously, but to the people of Egypt. So he was saying, look, like I am deity, but without your word, no one will lift a hand or foot in all of Egypt. And in the midst of all of this, even as a man of God who is not worshiping at the feet of Pharaoh, as everyone else was, Joseph finds himself now in a very different context. And even whenever he had the chance, okay? And do you understand the potential offense that Joseph brought to Pharaoh? Do you get that? Pharaoh views himself as deity. And he goes, servant of mine, worship before me and tell me how you will help your God and interpret this dream for me. And he goes, I won't do it, but God will. Namely, you're incapable, but my God is. Do you realize how much of a backhanded slap that could be to a guy that thinks he's God? Very, very an intense thing for Joseph to choose to do. But he does, because why? Even in the midst of any sort of opposition, in the midst of any sort of thing, he knows where all of his favor, all of his good things, all of his purpose comes from, and it is chiefly from an almighty, infinite God. It lets us know in verse 46 that Joseph was 30 when this happened. I told you to make a mental note of how old Joseph was earlier. Namely, when he got sent into slavery, he was what? 17. So he has been in slavery and in prison for roughly 13 years. And has not seen anything come of it, more or less. I mean, yeah, sure, he's the best prisoner. Like, no, yeah, lots of hope there. He's the best slave. But in the midst of all this, right, he still hadn't gotten his break. It's been 13 years. Can I be real? Some of you have been a season of 2 weeks and you've already given up. Some of you have been in a season of 6 months. Some of you have been in a season. Can you imagine 13 years of nothing? If anything, halfway through it only got worse. You went from slavery to prison and you didn't do anything. It was lies. Like it wasn't even like, oh, I did something dumb. It was all done to him. And yet in the midst of all that, he recognized it. And it's the only thing that can sustain him. And it's the only thing that can sustain you and me. Do you understand that? It's not that he is fine, because he didn't find his strength in a thing, a destination, a purpose, a goal that he had perceived. He found it in the only thing that gives purpose everlasting, and that is God. The one who looks at you and says, I will magnify my strength in your weakness. I will be the one who walks alongside you when your legs don't work no more. I will be the one who breathes life into the dead. This is the one to which is the only sustainability you've got to hope for in this life. And so point 3 is this: stop looking for the bad in your circumstance and start looking for the opportunities in your circumstance. Joseph was constantly looking for God opportunities. He was looking and he goes, okay, don't forget me. He tells the cupbearer, this is an opportunity for God to do something. Don't forget me. I'm going to, do stuff for God if you'll be faithful to it. And he goes up, he goes, look, hey, guess what? This wasn't me, it was God. He's looking for opportunities. He's in prison and he's climbing the ranks. Why? Because he's intentional. He's just not rotting away in prison. He's got intentionality and he's got something that's larger when it comes to his purpose. When everything else is stripped away, what will you find your purpose in? Let's keep reading and wrap this up. 7 years of famine happened. After the 7 years of prosperity, thankfully Joseph took care of it. But what happens is it extends over to his brothers and his family far away, and they have to come to Egypt to get help from these storehouses. And there's this long back and forth before Joseph finally reveals who he is to his brothers, because they didn't recognize him at first, because it's literally been 13 years. If you looked at Seth at 17 and now in his 30s, you would not recognize the two people. So I understand that. And And it says this, Genesis 45, 3-7. This is when Joseph reveals himself to his brothers. Joseph said to his brothers, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But his brothers were not able to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. Do you understand this? They're like, oh, you're in charge of everything now? And we put you in, yeah, did we do that? That was what we did. Yeah. So we're about to die. This is okay. We're like, they're mentally preparing. And then his next word to them is this, come close to me. Yep, we're about to die. Okay. When they had done so, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. Exclamation point. They're like, yep, death is it. We do remember that. We are all on the same page. Yeah, pretty dirty secret we've been holding for 13 years. Thank you. And now do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now, there has been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years, there will be no plowing and reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve for you a remnant on earth and to save your lives by a great deliverance. This is about to be a heavy one for some of you. Is your purpose so founded in God that the people who took things away from you, you will ever allow yourself to get to a place where you can forgive them, love them, and give God the praise in spite of them? Because we've all been there. And Joseph, in the midst of this, just personifies the final point, and it's this: punctuate God's purpose with praise. And if you want to tack on forgiveness on that, that's probably a good one to put there as well. God is not a conductor of lightning bolts to zap you, okay? It's not what he's out there to do. He doesn't want to just see you hurt and writhe in pain. It's not the end goal. But when life throws stuff at you because you find yourself in a fallen world, the question is, will you respond with intentionality, and will you seek opportunities, and will you give God glory, and will that be what you find your purpose in? For Joseph, his purpose was not realized when he came to prominence in Egypt. It was realized every day when he woke up and chose to glorify God in every facet of who he was. Do you get that? The purpose was not realized at Egypt. God used it, and Joseph was able to look back in great excitement. He was able to punctuate it with praise and give God glory. But the story doesn't end there. It keeps going. We don't have time to hit it, but it does. And it's because Joseph is one that in every facet, he recognizes he doesn't have what it takes. So our takeaway statement once more is this: godly purpose is realized when we stop viewing our circumstances as affliction, but as opportunity. But the final word that I have for you is this. I wrote it down yesterday whenever we were in the midst of worship, and I literally just hit me, and it's just how God's been working with me in this subject. And I honestly wasn't even there yet. Even what I said last night as the final thing wasn't enough, and this is what I want you to get, okay? Purpose is not found in a life. Write this down, by the way. It's not in your notes. Purpose is not found in a lifestyle focused on a temporary destination, but an eternal one. Purpose is not found in a lifestyle focused on a temporary destination, but an eternal one. What do I mean by that? If you got something temporary right now that you're focusing on, it's going to let you down. Even when you get it, it's going to let you down. When you don't get it, it's going to let you down. But if your perspective is one of eternity, of God Almighty, who sent his one and only Son, Jesus, to live a perfect life, die on a cross for your sins that he did not deserve, and conquer death itself 3 days later, if that is what you find your strength in, your validity and the eternal reward and the eternal connection that we get to have with God because of it, then your purpose is founded. And your day in and day out will have great significance that you have never felt before. So if you're looking for something to put on your bucket list as purpose, you're out of luck. But if you're looking to change your perspective and your lifestyle to be purposeful, then you will find it. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we thank you that you are a God of purpose, that you don't want to have just a singular reality in this life for us that we're working towards. You've got eternity in mind. And we get to be with you if we will just recognize what your son Jesus has done for us. Maybe for the first time today, somebody in here has said, I don't have that purpose. I've never had that purpose, but I can tell you right now, I need it. So maybe you can just move in their hearts right now. Whatever that is, God, my prayer is that wherever each individual in here today is, that they will find their purpose from filtering the reality through you. Amen.